The Oklahoma City Thunder are without Chet Holmgren. How are they going to survive this portion of their schedule? What does Isaiah Hartenstein change? And should the Thunder go make a move?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. We're joined by Michael Martin. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube to discuss the Thunder's run of injuries, which really was headlined on Monday by Chet Holmgren being officially rolled out for at least 8 to 10 weeks until he gets a return to play protocol, and probably much longer than that. So he is expected to return this year, but a lot of things look different. Michael, how are you feeling today?
Feeling better now that we actually know the timetable. Just the worry of not knowing was not a good spot to be in. I bet it wasn't for us. I bet it wasn't for the team or the fan base either. But feeling better now that we kind of know what's in front of us. Yeah,
it seems like it'll be as simple as possible in terms of the rehab process. Just from every like sports doctor out there that's talked about this injury, just kind of healing it up, and then in 8 to 10 weeks. You can start ramping up and reconditioning, which will, I think, take a while because you can't just go from like nothing to NBA level condition. But once he gets ramped up, I think he'll still have some wiggle room there to knock the rest off before the playoffs. So it's a bummer because of what Chet's season individually could have been, because of what this Thunder season was off to. I mean, a historic start and the best in franchise history. But it's not the worst possible news, because when that injury first happened, you kind of feared the worst of at minimum a season ender.
Yeah, no, it was a scary time for sure. I mean, it felt like the arena just went silent for a very long time. The game that night against the Warriors was definitely an afterthought compared to everyone just worrying about Chet. But, it's the best of a bad situation, I guess. Like you mentioned, he's going to have enough time to ramp up for the playoffs. And really, I mean, if you're talking about windows, that's probably one of the better outcomes that this could have been. But yeah, it's going to take him some time to get back in shape, just because you're not going to be able to run a lot, I would guess, on a fractured hip. And then also just adapting to adjusting to more physicality, because that's another thing that I just can't imagine he's going to get a lot of work in.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what that looks like. He was very introspective about it on Twitter the night of. We've seen this Thunder team play without Chet Holmgren now, and they elected to start Wiggins in his place and start Joe and Wiggins with the now core three instead of the staple four of Shea, Dort, and Dub. What do the Thunder have to do to continue to survive in these stretches, however long it'll be, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, without Hartenstein?
I thought you saw some of the blueprint the other night against the Clippers with them getting up a ton of threes. I asked Mark about it the other day, where they shot their season high for threes in the first quarter, second quarter, and a first half. And that's just one of the things they're going to have to do, because Zubac in particular, it was very obvious the Clippers were trying to get it to him early and often. And the Thunder were able to neutralize that by playing with a lot of pace, forcing a lot of turnovers, and making some threes. So I think it's the three ball, pushing the pace, and those same turnovers that we've seen from this season.
Yeah, that's going to be where they're able to make up some ground. They should be a better three-point shooting team than most that they play each night, because they have a lot of versatility, a lot of weapons out there. And then defensively, if you can create turnovers and just win the possession battle, where you might get killed on the glass and you might get killed in the paint, but if you can create more possessions than your opposition has with the amount of scores that you have, and again, just the overall talent disparity that you'll have over most teams still with this injury, just like you saw against the Clippers. Yeah, they made a run to come back from down 20, but you had more possessions and you won the game because of it. So I just think that if there's any team who you can trust almost to play extremely hard and to play with a ton of injury that's necessary and required to play with whenever you don't have a center, it would be this one, who's kind of been used to playing small more than any other team.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years, Rylan, who has won more and won in weird ways than the Thunder? Like, this is sort of routine for them. Like, it's a bad situation to be put in, but Shea said it after the Clippers game. He's like, I haven't played with the traditional center real or big other than when Chet got here, and he's not traditional either. So there are some things that the Thunder can do, but sort of to your point, if the Thunder try to go out there and play teams like straight up, they're going to get killed on the boards. You have to find ways to shift things in your odds, and I think that's going to be with the pace, turnovers, and threes, like we mentioned.
I'm really curious to see what teams are going to do when it comes to the Thunder playing small. And we've seen throughout the last couple of seasons that coaches love to just try to fight fire with fire and go small themselves. It's what really hurt the Pelicans in the playoffs. I mean, they weren't going to win that playoff series, but they certainly shouldn't have gotten swept, I don't think, if they wouldn't have been so stubborn with not really utilizing their size advantage. You saw Dallas with two bigs was able to exploit that in round two because they just didn't have a choice but to play big with their personnel. And then last night, Ty Lue, what got them down by a ton was trying to out small ball the Thunder, and he put Zubac back in the second half. Zubac was incredible. They did a good job of clearing out and getting him clean entry passes, and that kind of run was kind of spurt by him. I'm curious to see how teams respond to balancing. Yeah, your big's going to get killed defensively. It is what it is. But in totality, whenever you mix in the rebounds and what you can do down low offensively, you might come out ahead.
I think the main thing is, like, we're stressing the same points, but the turnovers in particular, because if you can get the ball away from them and turn it over without them even having a chance to get an entry pass or a shot up or they can get a rebound for a Zubac or a big like that, that changes everything. So you're going to have more ball control for some of these teams. In the Thunder, it's going to just be that much more of an emphasis on turning teams over. But yeah, like you mentioned, the first half, the Clippers tried to match them, and some of that was just it turned into a track meet, which just totally neutralized Zubac. So I don't know. They didn't have much of a choice, but whenever they went back to it in the second half, they made some adjustments. Everything looked a lot better.
So we'll see what teams elect to do, and then we'll see how the Thunder survive the stretch, because when Hartenstein comes back, this all gets scrapped and it looks completely different. We'll talk about what those changes could look like coming up. But first, I want to say right now, but our friends over at FanDuel, go check out FanDuel today, because FanDuel's great. You can tackle the NFL action at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you have a hunch in the middle of the game, or you just want to predict the outcome, you can go check out FanDuel at FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, join today. New customers can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet when you go to FanDuel.com. You can also bet on the NBA, which the Thunder right now are 14.5-point favorites against the New Orleans Pelicans. If you like that line, go check out FanDuel. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Go check out the Locked On NBA podcast. I host the Saturday game night show. Game nights comes out after every single slate of NBA action. And also we have our midday show over there as well, talking big picture NBA. That's Locked On NBA for the national perspective of basketball. Joining us today is Michael Martin. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael, possibly a week, possibly 3 weeks, but sometime relatively soon, Isaiah Hartenstein will make his return to the floor. What changes when Hartenstein comes back? That's a very broad question, but it's interesting that the Thunder are going to have to, almost in the span of like 20 some odd games, got to go through 3 different phases of how they're playing stylistically.
I think there will be a big exhale across the roster and the organization of just like, okay, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, we have some stability here for a little bit, because the heart injury just to begin with in the preseason was a big blow. But to Mark's point that he talked about, if it was going to happen, it was a good time that he already got some time in during the preseason. So this isn't just completely foreign for him joining this team or the team playing around him. But I think he's going to have a big impact as a screener, which we just haven't seen for Shea or Dub. I mean, Shea had the year with Steven Adams, but outside of that, not really anything. And just the overall passing, especially in the second unit, I'm really, really excited to see. We have a lot of cutters. You'll see with guys like Wiggins, Joe can shoot, Caruso's a good cutter and decent shooter. I'm really excited to see how Mark maximizes those lineups, and also seeing who Mark kind of buoys and ties Hart to in some of these rotations.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what this looks like, because when you view this team, I think that when Chet went down, your natural inkling is to just like panic and want to like jump off the cliff. But all things considered, the fact that he's going to return this year is all the sign that you needed to understand that this team's still going to be okay. Like when you look at what they did from a year ago, winning 57 games, yes, Chet Holmgren was a massive part in that. And Chet Holmgren is the difference in what's been a historic start and continuing and possibly having a historic season to what it is now, which is still good. Like, the Thunder are not going to fall out of the playoff picture. They're not going to be in the play-in. They're not even going to fall out of the home court advantage picture. Even Joe Mazzato, who is not the most optimistic fella, predicted that the Thunder would still be the number one overall seed in the West. So the just sheer talent from Isaiah Hartenstein, yes, it's different. It's not the shot creation and three-point shooting of Chet, but man, does he really help teams win games. You can go and look at what he did for you in New York in a similar spot last year as a guy who really stepped up for them after injuries. Like, he is going to be awesome. You cannot understate the upgrade that you got for in terms of a complementary piece with Alex Caruso. And you're driven by Shea and J-Dub, who have an opportunity right now to prove to the world that they're great players. Like, Shea has already proven that, but Shea can even take a step up of like, what if he goes on a run here, Michael, of like, he scored 45 last game. What if he goes on a run of just scoring no less than 33 points the rest of the month and just really drives this team whenever they're going through this adversity? That raises even his stock, which is already almost at the ceiling.
Yeah, you're talking major MVP buzz at that point, which I think there was some sort of disconnect with the national media of people knowing Shea's good and thinking about him in sort of the MVP light, but the team's so talented that it's sort of like one of those things where he doesn't feel as impactful. But to your point, the Thunder have an ultra stable roster in terms of just baseline of talent, and that's going to win you a lot of games in the regular season. Hartenstein, to your point, with the Knicks was really, really good, filling in for Mitchell Robinson. And then you have a top 5 player in the entire world operating offensively for you, along with one of the better coaches in the league. That's a recipe for success. It sucks that Chet is out, but honestly, like, he played 82 games. He played in every single game, regular season and playoffs. If you told us a couple of years ago, coming off, the fracture that he had in his foot, that he would average 60 games a year in his first 2 years of playing, I think everyone would have taken that.
Yeah, that would for sure be a dotted line thing. And I just hate this for him, because anytime that he specifically gets hurt, people are going to point to his fragility and his injury proneness. I just don't think that could be further from the truth. Of the Lisfranc fracture was terrible court conditions and a literal freak injury. This was the same way. I mean, if any player in the world, no matter who you think is the most gifted frame, like Giannis is looked at as literally a god in terms of like a mythical Greek god of a body. If he landed that exact same way, he too would fracture his hip. Like, this has nothing to do with Chet. It has nothing to do with his injury proneness or not. To me, injury-prone guys are the guys that like consistently get just minor injuries, in the sense of like everyday injuries, that their body's more prone to pulling a hamstring, their body's more prone to twisting an ankle, their body's more prone to doing stuff like that. It's not having your hip explode whenever you land after trying to contest a shot. So I do hate it for Chet, because he'll have to re-fight those allegations, I think. But with Hartenstein returning, I still feel more so like Joe Mazzato of, this team is still going to be the best team in the West, because everything remains the same. You just lose the ability to be historic, where it's like, yeah, they won't like win some 65, 70 games, something crazy, but they're still going to be the team that I trust that can beat the most night in and night out of any NBA team, including in the Western Conference, this big, bad Western Conference. They still have one of the best players in the world. They still have the most talented roster top to bottom. And then they still have the ability to step up on any given night, where it could be J-Dub's night. It still could be iHeart's night. I think that people might underrate iHeart a little bit. So I still think that this team, if I had to bet right now, would be the 1 seed in the West.
Yeah, I had their floor as the 3 seed, and my only reasoning for that is because it's such a short sample size with the rest of the teams in the West. We haven't really seen any separation of teams kind of like shaking out and showing like who's really at the top. But I'm right there with you in terms of nothing historic is going to happen, but there's no real reason this team won't be competitive each and every single night. I know there's a lot of worry, and more of it's just because of the Chet injury and also just the next couple weeks. But once iHeart comes back and you sort of see him integrated, I think everything's going to really calm down.
Yeah, I think that people are a little too, over their skis. I think Hartenstein, like, what if he comes back in a week? Like, if Hartenstein's back in a week, which I think he could be, then this was all for naught, because to get to the Hartenstein point, you'll have to play this scrappy style. You're 1-0 using it. You'll have to play it against the Pelicans, who also don't have a big. I mean, they're jumping Jeremiah Robinson Earl and Yves Missi. Like, they're not going to be that imposing. And then the Suns is going to be tough because you have Nurkic there, but there's nothing really behind him. And then the Mavericks are going to be extremely tough. So we'll see what the injury report looks like for the Mavericks. But I think that that's a game where you really need to play Kenrich Williams a lot more. But the only game on this week's schedule that you think is a loss, I think, is Dallas. Like, I think that without Durant, even with Nurkic, you can still win against the Suns, and you should win tomorrow against New Orleans.
Yeah, New Orleans should be a win. You have the best player on the floor by far, like not even close. And then in terms of the Suns, like, is Bradley Beal out as well? I think I saw something that he was injured more recently.
Yeah, he got hurt on Sunday. I'm not sure that it's as like cut and dry as how Durant's already been ruled out, but he did get hurt.
But yeah, you have the guard talent that the Thunder have defensively. They're going to give these guys fits. Booker's having a slow start to this season. And it's one of those things where, like, Nurkic is going to kill you on the boards to some degree. But if he's going to have somebody if he's going to be somebody who you post up a bunch of times, I think the Thunder very much are going to live with that. But to your point, the Mavericks are the one that I'd circle as probably not going to happen. But my main concern really right now is just the health of guys like Dub and Caruso, who are guarding these bigger players, just because of the miles that sort of puts on those guys.
Yeah, I think that you would welcome Jurkic posting up the same way that you would welcome a bunt in baseball in the modern era, of just like, okay, go ahead and do that. But yeah, Bradley Beal is out with ankle soreness, so soreness could be totally different by Friday. He could still be out, but it could be totally different by Friday. Whereas Durant is like for sure out Friday for the Suns, but it could be Beal's first game back from ankle soreness, which you never know what guys look like in their first game back. But the only real daunting task this week, I think, is Dallas, because they did get Lively back, for this game against Golden State. According to Shams, we'll see if that actually comes through, but it usually does with Shams. So I'm interested to see how they handle this week, but I just cannot stress enough how Hartenstein coming back really eases everything. And as long as he's back within 3 weeks, I would be stunned if this team was not a home court advantage team, and I'd still bet on this team to be the number one overall seed.
Yeah, they're just, as I mentioned earlier, the baseline for success for this team is just very, very high. And then, yeah, if he is out for not just an extra week, but 2 weeks, really you have to worry about Wemby and the Spurs. But the Spurs, the rest of the roster is not that great. But Wemby is capable of winning a game by himself if you're guarding him with a bunch of guys who are much smaller. And then the Lakers with Anthony Davis, but Anthony Davis is pretty much a matchup problem for every team in the league. So that's just sort of just on its own. But I'm with you. I think that they're going to be able to right the ship and sort of just plug enough holes until Hartenstein comes back to sort of settle things. Shea has done this before with less talented rosters than this one, so I have a lot of belief in him, Mark, and the rest of the staff and roster to come through here.
It's going to be exciting to see what happens, but coming up, should the Thunder make a move? Plus, we'll talk about the NBA Cup. But first, I want to tell you right now, I'm talking to friends over at Mint Mobile. Check out Mint Mobile today, because with big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get, because it's somewhere that gets lost in translation between the store and your first month's bill, where the price just magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll be able to never have a gotcha moment again. With Mint Mobile, you'll pay $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, and they mean it. Say bye-bye to the overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overcharges. Go there right now to Mint Mobile and have them rescue you with their premium wireless plan starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk and text, and deliver you the nation's largest 5G network. So use your own phone with Mint Mobile plans, or bring your phone number and along with you with your contacts and everything, so it's perfectly seamless for your end, ditching the overpriced wireless networks that you're on right now for Mint Mobile and their deal to get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer, you need a new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month. Go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on the first 3-month plan only. Speed above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan will lessen. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Along with that freak out regarding Chet Holmgren's injury, Michael Martin, Let's Talk Thunder, has been the freak out of going to make a move, going to acquire a big, looking at free agency centers, looking at possible trades. Do you think that the Thunder will do something in the absence of Chet Holmgren?
If they do anything, it'll be something like bringing in somebody else on a two-way or an Exhibit 10, like a 10-day contract. This goes back to something where the Thunder have all these assets, so people assume they're going to make a move. But Ryland, we know they didn't make one last year when all the hand-wringing about that you need to get Chet, another center next to him, a traditional big, didn't happen. Years before that, the Thunder are achieving more than they need to, or more than expected. They need to make a trade. Presti is not going to make a trade just to make a trade. And especially after what we saw last year at the deadline, it feels like he's going to be a little bit more apprehensive or cautious when it comes to adding somebody mid-season. I don't think any big that they could add would be a giant sort of seismic shift piece. But I'm not expecting anything major if they do anything at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect them to do anything. I just think that they are confident in what they have in-house and what they are going to be relying on in that small ball lineup. Like the way that you hear Mark talk about the small ball stuff, he almost gets annoyed whenever he keeps being asked about it, because it's like, have you guys not been paying attention? We've been doing this for quite a while now, playing small. And I think that they're going to embrace that identity and embrace kind of that aspect of their game. And once you patchwork it together to Hartenstein, then you're kind of back to square one. Yes, there's a dip off in shooting and there's a dip off in shot creation for himself and Hartenstein compared to Chet. But you're back to the fundamental of, hey, you can start the game with a big, he can play Chet Holmgren's minute load or more, and then you play small doses of small ball lineups in between. Then once you get J-Will back, you are playing the exact same way as a year ago. You have the option of just going with a true big in the starting five, and then J-Will, who's like still an undersized center, but still a center. Or from that, you have a third option of just going into your small ball lineup. So like once you get those two guys back, everything falls in line. You're just a tick, worse, because Chet is so much better and so good at what he can do. You're just a tick worse, which in the regular season won't show up as pronounced as it will in the playoffs, which Chet should be back for.
Yeah, Chet is about as perfect of a fit next to Shea as you're going to find in the entire NBA. But Hartenstein's not a scrub. He's lacks the shooting that Chet's going to have, the ball handling, some of that stuff off the dribble creation, making his own shot. But he's going to add some things, rebounding and facilitating, that Chet just can't. So it's going to be sort of give and take in that aspect of it. But to your point, like, Mark, I can definitely tell is kind of getting agitated by that, just sort of the constant questions. And I think what it really boils down to is we all know that they've been playing small ball for a very long time. It's just the fact that there's not another option. And I think that's where some of the panic comes in. Because if you just did have Hartenstein, like you mentioned, until they're waiting for J-Will, everything's fine. No one's panicking. But the fact that they don't even have that option, I think, is what really is sort of making a lot of people worried.
Yeah, and I wonder if the lack of being frantic indicates that Hartenstein is going to be back in like a week. And this is just a guess, but I think that he could be back in that shorter term of that described window, just because you look at previous hand injuries and how almost seamless it is that they come back pretty quickly after they're rehabbed, and they're almost like in the blink of an eye, they're back to normal because of just the way that a hand fracture heals. So I think that maybe that's a signal of how confident they are that it'll be a short-term issue. And it also is a signal of how confident they are in what they've been building and utilizing since the day they hired Mark as the head coach. So it's kind of a combination of all those things. But I just cannot wait to see how this all unfolds. I still think that the Thunder are in a great position roster-wise to where I wouldn't go trade for Steven Adams. I wouldn't go make way for Moses Brown to come back in a sappy reunion. Just ride it out. Maybe maybe you go to a 21 rebounder, 21 rebounds in his blue debut, Malachi Leonce if you want to, but even that I don't think will happen. If they did recall him though, so we'll see if he gets to play any on Wednesday. But Michael, what do you have cooking up?
I had a video drop last week, which doesn't sound as good now with the Chet injury, but it was talking about you can bet on Chet as a future NBA superstar, which I still believe, and I think he's going to recover well. And then something else I have coming out pretty soon. This comes out Wednesday, so probably Wednesday afternoon, late afternoon, just a revisiting of the Dorcher Chamber with Brandon Ingram because they're playing the Pelicans today. So look forward to that. You can see just sort of how exactly Lou went about putting BI in cuffs.
Yeah, I cannot wait for that. It's going to be an interesting game because it's silly to say this anytime in November, but the November games count just the same as the ones in March do. It's almost like a must-win game for the Thunder. Obviously, the sky's not falling if they don't win it, but with as banged up as you are, this is one of the only times that you can almost guarantee yourself a win just based upon raw talent. Like there's no Jose Alvarado, there's no Jordan Hawkins, there's no Herb Jones, there's no CJ McCollum, there's no DeJounte Murray, there's no Zion Williamson. Like when that's the CVS receipt injury report for the Pelicans, you have to win that game if you're Oklahoma City.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're going to run up and down the floor on them, and this Pelicans team is just so worn down over the past couple of years with this constant injury thing. Like, Thunder fans think the injury stuff is bad right now. You should look up the history of the Pelicans over the last 5 years. It's just a road straight to hell, sort of, just the amount of injuries that they're plagued with. But yeah, having Shea just by himself, I think, is going to be probably enough. We saw him sort of up his production to make up for the lack of Chet. You've seen other guys scale up like J-Dub and Lou. I think you're going to continue to see that, and I think they get the win on Wednesday.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Go check out Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Check out @Michael on Sports on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter @Radlin_style. Subscribe to Locked On Thunder anywhere you get your podcast from. And until next time, be good and be good to one another.